Well, 2 years into the pandemic, elementary students continue to lag behind in school. Some educators say this is going to impact kids for decades. Thanks for staying with us this afternoon. I'm Tamsin Fidel.
And I'm Erin LeBeau. So COVID upended the way that many children learn to read, and the proof is in the numbers. So during 2019 school year, more than half of the students in kindergarten through second grade were on track with literary instruction. But during 2021, that school year, those numbers actually dropped. So now teachers and parents are still trying to get those kids back on track.
Yeah, they sure are. Well, joining us now is Dr. Rebecca Manis, a learning specialist with Ivy Prep Learning Center. And Dr. Manis, thanks for being with us this afternoon.
Pleasure.
Yeah, let's go ahead and talk about it. Start out with some of the reasons that kids are lagging behind, especially when it comes to reading.
So I think there are 4 reasons that come to my mind. First of all, we know that reading is a developmental process. So there are children who are at different stages of the continuum anyway. A second reason is that there's been a huge disruption to the kind of systematic education that we need for our kids. And so that can spill up and add up to problems in developing basic reading skills. A third reason is that both parents and teachers were burdened, which means that they may not have been able to identify problems and fill in the gaps along the way. And a final 4th reason is that it happens that COVID learning happened right in tandem with some major disagreements in the literacy field about how to help kids read. Wow. And so there's been a rethinking about how to teach children beginning reading skills separate from the actual COVID situation that we found ourselves in.
So is there a specific age group or grade that is actually experiencing most of this learning lag?
Your study, the one you highlighted, particularly speaking about beginning literacy skills, the process of what my professor at Harvard many years ago, Jean Chall, called breaking the code, or learning to read so that later on in middle school, you could read in order to learn. Certainly that's been a major focus because we need to help kids break that code and become fluent readers. However, I'm seeing it as a complaint that parents and kids have in middle school, where they have to start learning about material where they don't have as much background knowledge. And then again in high school and college or even grad school, where they need to assimilate information, and some of those scaffolds just haven't been as systematically practiced in the past few years.
Well, let me ask you this. Now that school is out, some kids might experience what's called the summer slide, where there's, of course, a decline in their reading ability and other academic skills. So what are some different ways parents can help their kids learn to read at home and just kind of keep the momentum going?
So parents are right there as they are at every stage and every factor of a growing child's life. So we know that so much learning happened in a naturalistic way. In other words, you don't need to be a mini Ivy Prep Learning Center. A parent's role is to understand their children's learning and try to foster it, and then get great help if that's necessary. Per the sign that you've just put up, one piece is that reading is built on language. So the more we can read with kids, discuss with our children, if our kids aren't particularly fluent readers and we can listen to audiobooks together and then discuss the information, the sort of help that we're giving them in talking about predicting what might come next as we listen to a story on an audiobook is going to transfer to skills that can then help them in the classroom. In thinking about helping children break the code of reading, doing things like watching YouTubes together with them helps them see the words and reinforce what some of those words are and build up their fluency. And finally, one of the best things a parent can do is model a love of reading by sitting next to your kiddo and reading a book that you love too.
Okay, so you say there are some rules parents need to keep in mind to help get their kids back on track with reading. What are they?
Well, one of them is give your child opportunity to read things that they love and that also are what we call an independent reading level. In other words, we don't want our kids to be constantly struggling. We want them to be fluent and in the zone, because in turn, that helps them pick up their pace of reading. when they're reading more quickly, then they can absorb and retain the information. So find books that your child is comfortable with. Another thing, if you have an opportunity to practice some phonics rules with your kids, say reading a Dr. Seuss book and looking at some of the word family patterns, or if your child asks you what a word means and you have a chance to try to clap it out with your kid, those are some opportunities to do that. We also know that the flip side of reading is writing, and many of those beginning writers are having difficulty with aspects like forming letters. So doing activities and showing your kids how letters are built on common basic letters is helpful. Think about it. A C then grows into being an O, an A D, or a G. So showing your kids some of those hand strokes that may have not been reinforced due to COVID disruption is a step toward improving those graphomotor skills and moves them on course to then write about more sophisticated ideas.
We don't realize how much time was lost and what each one of those days actually meant in the learning process. Dr. Manis, thanks so much for joining us this afternoon.
My pleasure.
Nice to have you.